Do you like reading? I do. In fact, I love it. And I mainly have J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter to thank for it. In Hungary, where I live, for many decades, one of the first books a student had to read is called Kincskereső Kisködmön by Ferenc Móra. It is a young adult book, from freaking 1918, the closing year of World War I. The book covers themes such as poverty, the death of loved ones, being disabled, envy and the remorse it causes, so very heavy themes, and while it teaches valuable life lessons and the quality of the writing is also good, it is not a happy book at all. Which is fine. Suffering is part of our lives, we need to learn about these things, but I do not think that the 3rd grade of primary school is the right time for this, and especially not in the form of a book, because in 3rd grade many students are still struggling to read, me included. Because if this is what reading is about, then I want nothing to do with it. But I was lucky. It was the autumn of 2001, the first Harry Potter movie was to come out towards the end of the year, and together with it, the Lego Harry Potter sets. I wanted those sets badly, so my parents offered me a deal. I can have Harry Potter Lego sets if I read the books. My mom soon bought me the first book, and I started reading. It was a very slow progress, but I was motivated. First, by the Lego sets, later, by the plot. I wanted to know what happens next with Harry, Ron and Hermione. The Harry Potter books taught me how to read. They made me love reading. First in Hungarian, then, by the time the Deathly Hallows came out, in English. I am not a hardcore Harry Potter fan, and I never was. As I grew older and read lots of books, I became aware of Rowling's mediocre writing, the logical inconsistencies in the plot, the shallow depiction of the characters. But I will be forever grateful for Rowling and the Harry Potter series for growing up with me, teaching me the love of reading, and I will always look at the books with tremendous amount of nostalgia. In 2001, along with the first film and Lego sets, another series of Harry Potter products saw the time of day, the Harry Potter video games. I do not remember exactly when I played with the first game, probably it was in 2002, but I remember that even my piano teacher played the game, and after the lessons we would discuss the spells and the differences between the plot of the game and the book. When, almost a decade later, I first replayed Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone on the PC, it was probably nostalgia that drove me. However, as time went on, I found myself reinstalling it over and over again. I had to ask myself, is this really happening only because of the nostalgia, or is this something else? And while I cannot deny the nostalgia I feel towards this game, I must acknowledge that the 2001 Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone PC game is genuinely fun to play. How do I know that? Well, if this was only nostalgia, surely each time I replay the game, I would play it from start to finish. But I usually don't. When I pick up the last wizard card at the beginning of the final section of the game, I usually just quit or start a completely new game. There is something in this game that makes me replay it time and time again, but also makes me skip the last few levels. Why? What is so good in this game that makes me replay it, and what is so bad about the last section that makes me skip it? To answer this question, we need to play through the whole game and inspect it from many different angles. Hopefully, as we do that, we ourselves can learn and improve our own game development skills. However, before we do our analysis, there is one thing we should discuss: the game's design philosophy. The Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone PC game is a game. Obviously it is, but what exactly do I mean by that? Hogwarts doesn't make sense. Even if you were a wizard or a witch, would you really send your kid to a school where lessons look like this? But that is the point. Hogwarts does not have to make sense in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, because it is a game and it knows that it is a game. It does not want to faithfully represent how Hogwarts was in the books or the movies, it just wants you to have fun, and if fun can be achieved by jumping and climbing and opening chests and collecting beans, then that's what's gonna be in the game, regardless if it was in the books or not. Maybe it's just me, but I feel that nowadays games are afraid to be games. They want to be your second life. They tell you 100-hour-long epic stories, they want you to buy, sell, obtain properties, buy furniture, hoard thousands of collectible items, get an upgrade or new ability every 5 minutes, solve every side quest, climb the leaderboard, be online 24/7. And the only thing they forget to provide is fun. If you only take away one piece of advice from this video, let it be this one. If you are making a game, then do make a game. Follow the fun first and foremost, everything else should be secondary. If it is fun, then it is a good game. Of course, I do not claim that really this was the design philosophy behind the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone PC game, but I do know that I am having fun when I play it, or at least when I am playing through the good parts, so for the purpose of this video, this is a good enough premise. The game starts with a slideshow introduction, which is fine. It fulfills its purpose, and when this game came out, it is safe to assume that anyone who played it also read Harry Potter, so for most players it is just a revision of the plot anyway. My only issue with it is that I cannot skip it, which can become very frustrating on subsequent playthroughs, and this is true for all of the cutscenes, by the way. When we enter the game proper, Dumbledore greets us in an in-game cutscene. He introduces himself and says this.
Now, Hogwarts is full of secrets, Harry, so search behind every door, but keep in mind, not all secrets are rewarding.
This is a really good introduction to the game. It explains what the player will be doing throughout the game without breaking the fourth wall. Contrary to most of the latter Harry Potter games, in the Philosopher's Stone we only control Harry during the whole game. After Dumbledore's introduction, we can wander off if we want to, but the only way to progress is to meet Ron and participate in the tutorial that Fred and George made for us. This tutorial is a gem. It is clearly directed towards the player, as it includes button prompts, but at the same time it is directed towards Harry, so we are not thrown out of the experience. The tutorial explains almost everything we will find in the game. Climbing and jumping mechanics, both types of collectibles, enemies and health regeneration. It also makes us stay here until we have collected enough beans to trade them for our first wizard card. Fred and George appears later in the game multiple times and offer cards in exchange for beans. As the game progresses, they will reveal more information about their bean collecting scheme, which is a nice overarching theme for the game, and I like it a lot. Once we finish the tutorial, we meet with Malfoy and Hermione. They introduce themselves, and after that we learn our first spell. I think that following the spell pattern with the mouse is a good idea in itself, however, gameplay-wise it is not really fun. After learning the iconic Flipendo spell, we are entering our first challenge. Professor Quirrel explains how Flipendo can be used. It is by far the most diverse spell in the game. It can push blocks, barrels, knock off cauldrons, activate switches and also knock out enemies such as gnomes and thieves. It is basically a glorified pushing spell.
Flipendo!
Once we master the peaceful uses of Flipendo to advance the map and to collect beans and challenge stars, we are introduced to saving our game. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, we can only save using special save game books. Saving at given locations is fine, it suits better for this type of game, where we have corridor-like levels, not huge open worlds. Also, this saving method cannot be abused. We cannot create a save before each dangerous jump. We either complete and progress further, or we fail and are clearly not ready to progress, so need to practice more. And this design is actually not as outdated as you think it is. With the introduction of saving, the player is finally ready to face the first deadly hazards. Actually, the very first deadly hazard was thieves in the tutorial, but if you died there, I feel a bit sorry for you. There are gaping chasms below the platforms, and if we fall, we die. Or faint, as the game calls it. I remember playing this part as a kid. It was a huge difficulty spike for me back then, and I still think that this is one of the hardest parts of the game, although as an adult I would definitely not say that this game is hard at all. After completing this part, the game introduces the first living enemies, the gnomes. They are very annoying, attack in packs, and they deal double punishment. A bite from them not only reduces health, but makes us drop some of our Bertie Bott's beans, and the little bastards eat them up almost immediately, then do a rude dance. Gnomes are definitely the most iconic enemies in this game, at least for me. Once the gnomes are defeated, the door opens and we meet Quirrel. He awards us house points, and the more challenge stars we collected throughout the level, the more points we get. Fortunately, this game loads super fast on newer systems, but this can also cause issues down the line for the completionists, because the loading screen for each level provides valuable information about the things you can collect in that particular level. However, because of the fast loading time, the loading screen only appears for a split second. And off we go to our broomstick lesson. Flying itself is not fun in this game. The controls are clunky, and the broomstick practice level is actually probably the hardest broomstick activity we will be doing in this game. I think I managed to 100% this level only a couple of times. However, this is a good level nonetheless, because although flying is not my favorite mechanics in this game, it will be used several times, so having a level dedicated to this mechanic is nice. Also, if we manage to read the hint on the loading screen, we can get a wizard card, the only one in the game you can pick up without watching the long and unskippable pickup animation. Neat. Speaking of unskippable things, there are tons of transition videos in the game which inform the player about certain routes becoming available, explaining a mechanics or a story piece. The best way to prevent an unwanted video skip is to not allow skipping the video at all. However, if you need to repeat a video 2 or 3 times because of death and reload, not being able to skip it becomes very annoying. So if you are making a game with many videos, allowing the player to skip them is almost a must. In the next level, Hermione teaches us the Alohomora spell. It is a nice touch story-wise, but getting house points for it is a bit stupid in my opinion. Also, did you notice that no matter how many house points we earn, Slytherin will always have more? It is a nice touch though. Alohomora is a very useful spell. It will open doors, chests, and will reveal secret areas behind bookshelves, paintings and mirrors. This mini-level has one of my favorite and least favorite aspects of this game. Hermione never says that we can cast Alohomora to the mirror. However, when we go near it, we can hear the croaking of a chocolate frog. So we might as well try casting a spell at it. And it indeed works. The secret room is revealed with the chocolate frog in it. I think these secrets are the best. The game gives us a hint. This time it is audio, but later there are visual hints as well, and allows us to figure out how to solve it. At times it can be inconsistent, we will see examples later, but as a general design direction I think it is really good. And after this particular event we might feel the urge to cast spells at anything that might seem even a little suspicious. Now, onto one of my least favorite aspects. In this room we can find a wizard card. However, if we decide to follow Hermione first into the room with the mirror, the secret door will close and we will be unable to pick up the card unless we quit the game and load the last save. I understand that designing a map with full backtracking is hard and I do not expect it. However, the end of each section or level should be clearly communicated to the player, so if they want to, they can go back to find all secrets, or they should be able to replay the level without the need to replay the whole game. Let us talk about collectibles, since at this point we have technically encountered everything. There are the beans, the most common collectible type. As Fred and George put it,
30 bots every flavour beans are fun to collect.
And they are not wrong. I do not really know why it is fun, though. Maybe because they are colorful and this attracts our sight towards them, or maybe because seeing a number increase is just simply good for our human minds. Regardless, we will have a ton of beans to collect, and it is worth it because occasionally Fred and George will trade wizard cards with us for 25 beans each. However, wizard cards are the real deal. There are 24 of them which we need to collect if we want the secret ending. Some of them are pretty hard to find. Finally, there are the challenge stars. These are only available in spell lessons, and the more we collect, the more house points we get at the end of the lesson. And these 3 actually cover every aspect of collectibles. Beans are there for the player to do something and get that constant dopamine hit, and they also have other uses we will explore later. Wizard cards are the valuable collectibles. Finding one is a glorious moment that is emphasized even more by the spawning sound and the pickup animation. To achieve this effect, however, they need to be rare, and this is where challenge stars come in. They are more common and easier to find than cards, but way more valuable than beans, and what makes them worth picking up is that they are tied to a given level and contribute to a larger goal, the house point race. In many modern games you have near infinite collectible categories, which is not ideal. So many collectibles can make collecting them feel like a chore instead of it being fun, or it can make collectibles feel worthless. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the different types of collectibles complement each other quite well, which makes collecting them fun and also rewarding. And of course, the most important collectible, or I should say pick-up object, the chocolate frog. This is the only collectible that gives out a sound, and for a health pickup this is quite useful, especially because this is the only thing that restores health in the game. After the Alohomora mini-tutorial, we learned the Wingardium Leviosa spell from Professor Flitwick. This spell is a letdown, especially compared to Alohomora and Flipendo. The only thing we can do with it is put some heavy boxes on top of pressure pads. They could have at least given us bigger boxes that the player can climb up on. It would have been a good complement to Flipendo when it comes to repositioning boxes. The challenge starts with a gnome ambush for some excitement. I see you, little bastard. But the rest is nothing new. Clever hint of a hidden area and some jumping on the ramparts. That is definitely not child endangerment, not at all. It is surprisingly short level, probably because it shares the map with the Alohomora tutorial. Also, this is the only lesson with a secret in the room where the teacher waits for us. The next part is one of my favorites. We are finally back to the corridors of Hogwarts, a place we will visit multiple times during the game. However, there is something different each time. On one occasion we will find a chest. On another, there is a new mirror or painting that hides a secret area. This is a very cheap and dirty way to reuse a map, but in this game it works because it is explicitly stated both in the books and in the game that Hogwarts Castle is magical, and if you find a secret once, it does not mean you will automatically find it later. However, you may find new ones instead, and this fact alone makes this arguably lazy solution actually brilliant. Of course, the designers were not that lazy, and each time we visit the corridors level, we are exploring different subparts of it. This makes the re-exploration of the already known central locations a little bit more exciting. This first time in the corridors is very dense. We can obtain 3 different wizard cards, 2 from secret areas and 1 from the Weasley twins, get 2 letters from Hermione, which is a game mechanic that will never be seen again. We can trigger 2 different cutscenes, one with Neville and one with Crabbe and Goyle, and to top it all off, we will have not 1 but 2 boss fights, one against Peeves and one against Malfoy. The first fight is quite straightforward. Cast Flipendo at Peeves a couple of times and we are done. Malfoy is different, however. He throws magical crackers at us that we can pick up by running over them and throw back at him. The problem is, this mechanic is never taught to the player. If something damages my character, if I stay close to it, I will run as far as I can. I do not think about picking it up, so the fact that we need to do just that is not exactly trivial, which is fine, I guess. I mean, every game mechanic needs to be introduced at one point. The problem with this one is that it is introduced as the only solution for a boss fight, and to make it worse, this mechanic is never used again. When I played this game as a kid, this fight was one of the low points for me, because I just could not figure out how to solve it. However, once we realize what we need to do, this fight becomes very easy, and off we go into the Hogwarts Grounds. When we enter, we are greeted by Hagrid, who invites us for an afternoon tea, then proceeds to work on the bushes. The Grounds is alright. It is a hub area similar to the Hogwarts Corridors, just a lot smaller. It is calm and cozy. The only path open to us leads towards the greenhouse, where we will have the herbology lesson. On the path, we will meet 2 other enemy types, the giant snail and the venomous tentacula. These enemies are not that dangerous. The snails totally ignore us, so we can easily dodge them. We can pacify them with Flipendo if we want to, however it is only temporary. The venomous tentacula is a bit more annoying. It actively wants to hurt us, and it occasionally does a double bite, which is very hard to dodge. However, because it is a plant, once we pass it, the danger is over. At this point of the game, we cannot defeat it in any way. At the greenhouse, we can obtain 2 more wizard cards, one from Fred and George and the other one from a secret area. Inside the greenhouse, Professor Sprout teaches us the Incendio spell. This spell is good against all types of plants that want to hurt us, and, how convenient, the greenhouse is full of them. The Incendio challenge is one of my favorite areas in this game. I really like these old greenhouses with their slim steel structures and huge windows. I think the designers felt the same way, because this level is so big it actually needs 2 loading screens. The level introduces us to a new mechanic. Defeat all enemies in a room to unlock a secret. This mechanic is used only twice in the whole game, at least that is the number I know of, but hey, is not a one-off. Similar to the giant snails, the venomous Tentacula can only be pacified temporarily. As I mentioned before, this enemy is not too annoying, however, it is good that we finally have a spell against it. Then there is this scene.
Those vines are attacking that poor tree. That looks like a doxy. Ouch!
I really like this cutscene. Presents us a dangerous vine plant, as well as shows us the Doxy enemy, and we know it is an enemy because it attacks the girl. Luckily, the vines can be defeated with Incendio and the Doxy with Flipendo. I think I do not spoil too much if I tell you that this plant is actually the Devil's Snare, one of the challenges that defend the Philosopher's Stone. Introducing the player to one of the final challenges of the game in this safe environment is a very good design choice. After a little more weeding, gnome hunting and challenge star collecting, we finally complete this unique and cozy level and we are teleported back to the Hogwarts Grounds. We do not spend too much time here, but aside from a few beans, there is not much to collect anyway. The next level is another boss fight, so to speak. We need to chase Malfoy on a broomstick to get Neville's Remembrall back. This is probably the only broomstick level in the game that I like. I suspect it is mostly because the map itself is very diverse with large trees, caves and the Hogwarts Grounds themselves. However, this is also a great level from a game design perspective. Remember, in the broomstick practice we learned how to control our broom and how to fly through mostly stationary circles. The game now builds on that knowledge to increase the challenge. We need to catch a moving target while also avoiding stationary damage objects, the bludgers. Once we collide with Malfoy enough times, we can finish him off with a timed button press. And with this, our Quidditch toolset is mostly complete. We will be following the snitch just as we followed Malfoy. We will need to dodge the bludgers, except during Quidditch they will be moving as well. And catching the snitch requires a timed button press just like here. So this level not only builds on previous knowledge but also prepares us for the challenges of the future. It's excellent design. The last time we visit the Hogwarts Grounds, we do not get anything except for a cutscene where we give Neville back the Remembrall, then Professor McGonagall tells us that we have earned our spot in the Quidditch team. We can also admire the bush dragon that Hagrid created while we were away. The only open path leads towards Hagrid's hut. This is another typical game level. Nobody expects Hagrid to enter Hogwarts every day following this murderous path, but it is fun and exciting to traverse it in a platformer game, so who cares? I really like how the level loops back on itself at the lake, and this level has one of my favorite locations, the cave with the waterfalls, the perfect hiding place for a wizard card. Also, we have this bridge here with the beans. This is a really good hint. We know we should be able to go up there, but how? We can clearly see the pathways, but the first step is missing. This is the point where the designers wanted us to remember the 2 gnomes in the greenhouse level, defeat both of them and get the reward. The problem here is that the gnomes actively chase the player, so defeating them is almost a must. However, the snails are peacefully minding their own business, they can only be pacified temporarily and we can jump over them anyway. No wonder that it took me a long time to get this secret. I do not even remember if it was by accident or by watching a guide. So this one is one of the weaker designed secrets, however probably still not the worst. The next level is a bit random. We need to help Hagrid by bringing him Fireseeds that are required to heat his hearth to a high enough temperature that his dragon egg can finally hatch. I really like that this level takes place in the wilderness instead of Hogwarts. However, there was nothing like this in the book. And of course, there was a chapter in the book that took place in the Forbidden Forest, but unfortunately that part is not in the game. So, while I really like the level itself as well as the concept, I do not really understand why the developers created this forest level instead of the one that is in the book. But putting this aside, this level is strong. The surrounding is phenomenal and the gameplay is solid. We are introduced to the suspiciously door-shaped cave walls and, spoiler alert, they are indeed secret doors. The game teaches this by clever foreshadowing. We see the chest, so we are on high alert, and hopefully we will find the very first suspicious cave wall in the next room. Just like the spell challenges, we are required to collect things, however, this time it is Fireseeds instead of challenge stars. And because story-wise it would look weird if we returned empty-handed, the very first Fireseed bush was put inside the room with a door, which only opens if we collected the 3 seeds that fall out of the bush after casting Flipendo on it. We also meet the very last common enemy in the game, we can defeat by ordinary means. It is a turtle that shoots fire out of its backside. It can be defeated using the Flipendo spell. One hit turns it upside down, however, after a certain time it can turn back and attack again. In order to defeat it permanently, we must use Flipendo to push it into a conveniently placed hole or into the water. There are some fun unique twists in this level, such as the boulders we need to push to progress, or the stalactites we need to break before we can use them as platforms. After the completion of the level, we return back to Hagrid and see Norbert hatch thanks to the seeds we collected. And finally, Quidditch. One of my least favorite parts of this game. Follow the stupid snitch, and if we are close enough to it, the game changes to autopilot for a bit, and in a minigame we must catch the snitch. There are some bludgers occasionally, and the enemy catcher might bump into us sometime for a little bit of damage, but other than that, this is really uninspired and bad part of an otherwise magical game. I understand why the developers included Quidditch, and it gets the job done, but in this current form, Quidditch makes the game worse, and if the developers had the chance to leave it out, it would probably have been the right choice. After the Quidditch match against Slytherin, we are back in the Hogwarts Corridors. This time, we can discover a new segment of it that opens up from the central circular hall where we had our battle with Peeves. Nothing noteworthy here, we can cast spells on everything in the hopes of finding something. We meet with Fred and George, who tell us a bit more about why they need the beans. We also move forward with the story as we see Professor Snape leaving the Forbidden Corridor, limping quite badly. Suspicious. And now comes my favorite part of the game, which is the last few levels, starting with the Lumos spell challenge. In the book, this spell creates light for the sole purpose of illuminating dark spaces, however, in the game the designers put a twist on it. You can only cast Lumos onto these gargoyle statues, and the effect is a shining platform which we can jump on. This is the last spell we will be learning in this game, so finally we have our full toolkit. Lumos does not change the game fundamentally, but the Lumos platforms are usually smaller and many of them are moving. While I like this level, I need to mention the 2 low points. This level hides, in my opinion, 2 of the worst secrets in the game. One holds a challenge star and the other a wizard card. The card is hidden behind the large rose window in the first big room of the level. These windows are not that common in the game, or at least I do not specifically remember them, but here in this room we have 2, which is, in my opinion, makes the window in question much less suspicious. But the worst offender is definitely this secret with the challenge star. We see the hint once we arrive in the circular room, so we might suspect that maybe we need to look for the door somewhere here. Of course, the entrance to this hidden room is already behind us, but we do not know that, and if we are unlucky and enter the next room during our search and cast Lumos onto the gargoyle, the option for backtracking will be taken away. So, how do we access this hidden room? Simple, it is behind these candles. The problem is, these candles appear in many places throughout the game, and none of them can be interacted with except for this one. So we need to backtrack, figure out where the door should be, and find it without any visual clues. I do not know if it was difficult only for me, but I think this is a very bad design. I get that secrets are supposed to be hard to find, but for me this one clearly falls into the unfair category, which is the opposite of fun. Later we have a boss fight with Peeves, mechanically the exact same as the last one. We encounter some doxy traps, a lost student, I really like this small detail, and nearly headless Nick, who says hello to us. I have a lot more to say about this level, but we will return to it later when I talk about atmosphere and art. After the Lumos challenge, we are back to the Hogwarts Corridors. We only have a few things to discover as we move towards the dungeons to go to potions lesson. The 2 most noteworthy are of course the 2 wizard cards. The potions lesson takes place in the dungeons, of course, and Professor Snape introduces himself by deducting a few house points from Gryffindor. He sends us deeper into the dungeons to fetch some ingredients, and gameplay-wise it is a good choice. This level has some difficult places and we need most of our spells to get through it. The ingredients we must collect are located in special rooms where the doors only open if we collect the ingredients. But the star of the level, besides the atmosphere, is definitely the Slytherin house ghost, the Bloody Baron. Our first meeting with him is very dramatic. The torches fade as he passes them, and I remember that as a child I tried to escape his corridor as fast as I could, but there is much more to the Bloody Baron that meets the eye at first. He is a type of enemy that cannot be pacified, not even temporarily, but at the same time he is very passive and only damages us if we cross his path. So, from this point of view, he is much less dangerous than a gnome or a doxy who actively chase us. However, unlike them, the Bloody Baron deals a massive amount of damage, which is a fair trade, I guess. But what is even more interesting are the metal doors that only open for the Baron. If we are brave and do not run away immediately, we can observe that the Baron patrols back and forth, and each time he crosses the metal door, the door stays open long enough for us to slip through. And most of the secrets in the dungeons are behind these doors. The first secret area associated with the Bloody Baron only contains beans, so no big deal if we leave it out. The second encounter happens in a circular corridor, so by following the ghost we might get a glimpse of how the doors work. And when we meet the Baron the third and final time, using our gathered knowledge we might be brave enough to enter the room he emerges from, and this time it is really worth it because we are rewarded with a wizard card. And to make this secret area even more unmissable, the developers also used a hint in the form of a chest. It took me several playthroughs until I realized that I can cross the metal doors during the first and third encounters with the Baron. For me, these secret areas were hard, but unlike the ones in the Lumos challenge, these secrets are fair because the level gives us many hints, and by putting the most valuable treasure, the wizard card, in the last secret room, the game clearly shows that it tries to give a fair chance even for slow learners. I also find it very creative that the secrets in this level are connected to the level's main enemy. After returning with all ingredients, we find that the lesson has ended and Snape deducts a few more house points from us for being late. Also, the challenge stars we collected during our tour of the dungeons are worthless in his eyes. After the lesson, we are back in the Hogwarts Corridors for one last time. However, the corridors are now empty. There are no students, and I have only found 2 ceramic pots that can be broken for 1 bean each. Not worth it. This is because we are in a hurry. As Ron told us, Hermione is trapped by a troll in the lavatory, so it makes absolutely no sense that in the next level we are the ones who are literally luring the troll to the exact lavatory where Hermione is. The troll chase itself is quite intense. We need to keep moving, and the floor is filled with holes and the camera is facing backwards. There are 2 positives I can say about this level. The first is that it's relatively short, the second is the trail of beans that shows us how to navigate. Blue beans mean there is no danger, green means get ready for a jump, and pink means you need to jump now. The next part of the level is the boss fight itself. We need to protect Ron from the debris the troll throws at him while he tries to levitate the troll's club to drop it on its owner's head. We can move sideways, but since the target is Ron, we make ourselves a disservice if we move away from him. So the fight is basically standing next to Ron and casting Flipendo at whatever is flying towards Ron. It is a very unimaginative fight. After this mess, we are having our next Quidditch match, this time against Ravenclaw. Literally nothing changed compared to the previous Quidditch level, except for the pre-programmed path of the snitch. There is nothing inherently bad about this, however, the weather conditions could have been different. At least, we do not have to play against Hufflepuff in the main story. The last 2 regular levels before the finale are the most fun in the entire game, at least in my opinion. Harry gets his invisibility cloak in a cutscene. We will use this to sneak past Filch and Mrs. Norris, to take Norbert to the astrology tower for Ron's brother in the first sneaking level, and then we need to sneak back to the Gryffindor common room in the second. With Filch and Mrs. Norris, we have encountered the last 2 enemies of the game, so before I talk about the sneaking levels, let us have a small detour and talk about all enemies briefly. The enemies of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone are a simple bunch. They do not have any special moves or behavior trees, they do not heal, do not retreat, do not apply advanced tactics. Their behavior is very simple, yet there is enough variety that the game stays interesting. Gnomes chase us when they have line of sight. If they bite us, they cause a little bit of damage and they also make us drop a few beans and eat them. This makes them one of the more complex enemies in the game. The next enemies we have encountered were the fire snails. They are basically moving obstacles that can be disabled temporarily. Then there was the venomous tentacula, which falls into the basically an obstacle category again. Probably because of this it cannot be defeated permanently, only temporarily. In my eyes, spiky bushes are not even real enemies. They function as destroyable walls with an added damage causing feature, but I thought I'd mention them for completion's sake. Then there are the doxies. They chase us just like the gnomes, however they only damage health and do not steal beans. Then we meet the fire turtle. This enemy attacks actively, but it is slow and can be pacified easily. However, unless pushed into a hole or water, it is able to recover and attack again. The Bloody Baron is basically just a more powerful version of the fire snail. It does not care about us, however it deals massive damage and cannot be pacified even for a small time. He is also the only enemy that is tied to exploration. Filch and Mrs. Norris are a combination of the passive and active enemy types. They patrol on a given path similar to fire snails or the Bloody Baron, but just like the Baron, they cannot be pacified. They do not chase us outright, since Harry is invisible. However, if we move close to them, they will give chase, and if they are close when we cast a spell, our cover is blown, we are caught, and it is game over immediately. So, all things considered, the enemies in this game are not too much of a hassle. Aside from doxies and gnomes, they either mind their own business, can easily be dodged, or are slow, therefore easy to defeat. And in my opinion, this fits the game quite well. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is a light-hearted platformer game aimed at younger players, and for this target audience the enemy difficulty is just right, and I think this is a win for the game. Knowing your audience and making a game tailored to them is one of the most important aspects of game development, and in my opinion the first Harry Potter game is a very good example of this. Now that we have talked about all non-boss enemies in the game, we can move back to the sneaking levels. On our way to the tower, we will only meet with Filch. The first room is very simple, but it teaches us all we need to know. Filch patrols the narrow path between the shelves, so passing next to him is almost impossible. Of course, if we stay away from him, we are relatively safe, however, the designers gently push us towards some even safer routes, the tops of the shelves. The first hint we see is a bean atop a shelf, and the second is a small ladder next to another shelf. Jumping is, of course, not without its dangers. If we miss a jump, we can easily find ourselves on top of Filch. Luckily, Filch carries a lantern which illuminates his surroundings, so with the help of the light, we can monitor his position from atop of the shelves. Filch and Miss Norris have one more ability that is both a blessing and a curse. If we manipulate our surroundings by opening doors, knocking things up, or breaking jars, they immediately run there. Encountering this for the first time is very scary and can result in a few game overs. However, interacting with objects is not too difficult once we factor in some quick escape plans or if we manage to cast our spells from a distance. The next few rooms are about getting familiar with these new mechanics. Navigating around Filch is relatively easy, but I remember that as a child I was always on edge, so the second half of this level, where we are alone with our shiny Lumos clouds, was a huge relief. The very last part of the level was always a bit controversial for me. Filch guards the entrance to the astrology tower, and there is not a chance we can slip past him into the tower. When we cross the bridge, a cutscene plays in which Peeves breaks a jar, Filch runs there, and Harry says this might be useful if he needs to distract Filch. Now, this is straightforward if you are not an idiot or if you know English. When I first played this game, I did not know English at all, and I also was an idiot. I saw the jars and I immediately thought of the yummy beans that were inside, and I remember getting very frustrated about breaking the jars and not only finding no beans, but also getting caught by Filch, who runs there to check what caused the noise. Looking back at it from now, I am laughing at myself, of course, but deep down I know I am not entirely at blame here. The game taught us from the very beginning the jars can be broken for beans, so by the end of the game it is not really a surprise that when the player sees a jar, they think of it as a bean source, and and deal with it accordingly. In my case, it meant that I walk close to the jar, cast Flipendo on it, and reap the reward. However, this level requires the exact opposite. Cast Flipendo on the jar from afar, wait till Filch runs to it, and then rush into the tower, leaving any potential being behind. I really think this confusion could have been solved by one single adjustment, using a unique model for the objects we need to break for the distraction, because unlearning previous knowledge is always harder than learning something new, and since jars were hiding beans and were present in the game since the second level, unlearning knowledge related to them is not that easy. After reaching the tower and delivering Norbert, we still need to get back to the dormitory without getting caught. By this point we know the drill. Jump on shelves, cast spells from afar, stay away from Filch. In the beginning cutscene we see that Filch calls for backup his cat Mrs. Norris. At first we might brush this off as a minor inconvenience. Now two characters patrol the floor, who cares? But I remember when I first played this game as a child and realized that Mrs. Norris actually patrols the top of the shelves, I was filled with genuine dread and hopelessness. These two levels are the shiny example of difficulty progression done right. The first level teaches us that staying on the floor is dangerous, but it provides an alternative safe route on top of the shelves, and since throughout the game we were jumping on platforms and magic light clouds, jumping on shelf tops will be easy and Filch will soon seem like a minor inconvenience. This relative safety is taken away by the second sneaking level, and it is so effective that even to this day, when I am playing this particular level, I notice myself concentrating a little bit more than I usually do for the other levels. In the first room, Filch is not patrolling between the shelves, instead he is standing guard in the doorway, and this serves a double purpose. First, this really forces us to climb the shelves as there is no other way out of this room. Second, since Filch is not patrolling, the floor becomes safe again, so we can adapt to this new situation in a bit more forgiving environment. From the second room onwards, the hand-holding is over and we are facing danger on the floor and on the shelves alike, if Miss Norris does not bug out, that is. On our way back to the Gryffindor common room, we find the mirror of Erised as well as Dumbledore. He says we should know how the mirror works in order for us to be prepared, and I wish Dumbledore had really prepared us, but we are not at the final boss yet, so the explanation will have to wait. In the last room, we need to use our distraction move once more, this time on Mrs. Norris. The level ends with us meeting the Weasley twins, and we finally see just how much beans they have been hoarding. They are not at all surprised to see us here, instead they ask for 25 beans in exchange for a wizard card for the last time in the game. And here I would like to take a moment to show you how frustrating invisible walls can be in a game. See, here are all the beans in the world, so much beans, and I cannot access them because of a stupid invisible wall. Avoid the usage of invisible walls if possible, they are immersion breaking. After we leave the secret bean storage room, the level ends and the game reaches its final level sequence. But before I talk about the finale, there is one major topic we need to cover. In fact, this might be the most important topic when it comes to this game, because only from a game and level design point of view, this game is solid and it's fun, but nothing special. However, when the atmosphere is added to the equation, this game suddenly becomes a jewel amongst the games of the early 2000s, and in my opinion, it is easily the most beautiful and magical of all Harry Potter games. In this game, Hogwarts is not just a place, it is its own character, it has personality, and it is apparent already in the opening cinematic. Hogwarts is a foreboding castle made of cold stone, yet when we look around, we are greeted with a welcoming atmosphere of warm yellows and roaring reds. The crackling flames give us comfort, yet the rattling of the suits of armor hint at something mysterious. It really feels like we are at a magical place, but it also feels like home. I think the designers have captured the exact feeling Harry, who has not had a real home before, must have felt when he entered Hogwarts for the first time. The welcoming yet mysterious atmosphere is further emphasized by the magical soundtrack of Jeremy Soule, who is one of my favorite composers, by the way. As we follow Ron throughout the corridors, we can marvel at the many ornaments that decorate Hogwarts, the carved handrails and door frames, the different columns. You can look anywhere you want, you will find some extra detail. During our tutorial, the music changes into a more dynamic tone, yet the warm colors, the wooden floors and ceilings still suggest that we are in safety. The adventurous tone continues during the Flipendo challenge, but this time the warm yellows and reds are sometimes replaced by much colder purples and blues coming from the huge windows. The metal guardrails, narrow but tall corridors give a more elevated atmosphere, yet the chandeliers still give out just enough warmth that we feel welcomed and safe. When we reach the first truly dangerous area, the music changes and the air is filled with the eerie laughter of ghosts. In the flying lesson, we see cheerfully green grass and blue skies, buttresses and bridges, and there is a constant chirping of birds. During the Alohomora challenge, we can hear the satisfying creaking of the doors and chests we have just learned to open, and during our Wingardium Leviosa challenge, we see the dazzling sunshine at the ramparts. In the greenhouse, we can almost smell the warm air filled with moisture and the scent of leaves and grass, and yet, when you should feel threatened, even if you aren't, because Venomous Tentacula is a joke, the game will let you know using blacks and dark purples, and the designers keep adding small details, such as the windows of this tower, which show different views depending on where you look and have a parallax effect. Marvelous! The quests for Fireseeds feel like a real adventure with its roaring waterfalls and the loud echoes of water droplets in the caves, not to mention the deep clangs of the door opening mechanisms. As the second half of the game approaches, the cheerful tone becomes more reserved. The warm yellows and reds are replaced by the cold purples and blues more and more. The castle will not become hostile, not at all, but you will feel that something has changed. The Lumos challenge is the peak in this regards, at least for me. After Professor Quirrel shows us how the Lumos spell works, we cross the chasm and enter the next room. I do not know if it is a bug or by design, but in this room there is no music, only some ambient noise, and suddenly it hits you that you are alone in a large, foreboding castle. The faint blue lights coming from the windows tell us that it is getting dark out there, and even the candle lights seem to be weaker. The roaring reds and comforting yellows of the entrance hall are long behind us. Likewise, many areas in the dungeons have no soundtrack, however, the visual design is not as strong as in the Lumos challenge, in my opinion. There are some highlights, such as the corridors of the Bloody Baron or the large pit with the rotating platforms. The sneaking levels do not feature too many windows as light sources. Here the designers are mostly using small candles that are not strong enough to illuminate large areas, so it is natural that these levels have a larger emphasis on shadows. The levels also feature the most amount of wooden elements, such as floors, beams, ceiling ornaments, door frames and wall covers. To me, wooden structures always mean comfort and warmth, so these levels really convey the feeling that we are not in danger because of our surroundings, but because we are actively looking for trouble by disobeying the rules. However, a wolf howl in the distance reminds us that even though the castle is safe, there is night out there with some very real dangers. Then there is the music.
Wingardium Leviosa! Wingardium Leviosa!
The music in this game changes a lot depending on where you are. This can be abrupt at certain places, however, it greatly adds to the feeling of comfort or danger. A special highlight for me is the mischief theme, as I call it. It only plays when gnomes or the Weasley twins are nearby, and I find it oddly satisfying that they share the same musical track. The atmosphere in this game is put together from many components, such as the magnificent music of Jeremy's Soul, the different sound effects, or the beautiful textures, but if I had to describe what makes this game so magical in only one word, I would say it's the lighting. The lights in this game are exaggerated and unrealistic, but lighting can convey feelings of warmth, feelings of home or danger, and the designers knew exactly what they were doing when they lighted the levels. Lighting in modern game engines is as easy as it gets, and they are the most effective way to set the mood with the least amount of effort. Sadly, already the second Harry Potter game toned this exaggerated lighting down, and the game is less atmospheric and less magical because of it. And now, with this out of the way, we can finally begin our descent of the Forbidden Corridor. As I have mentioned in the beginning of this video, I consider this part of the game to be the weakest, so much so that when I get here during my playthroughs, I most of the time simply exit the game. Entering the Forbidden Corridor itself is very atmospheric. The third floor is one of those places that is almost fully covered by wood, hence it provides a feeling of comfort and warmth. The closed-off section of the third floor keeps the wooden covering, but it is soon replaced with solid stone. The corridor is dark aside from the occasional torch, and it is covered with spider webs. The windows emanate a dark blue light with a hint of purple. It is very eerie and ominous. There is only one chest in the corridor, containing the last wizard card. Then we enter the room containing Fluffy, and the set sequence of single-use mechanics and wasted potential begins. As we have discussed before, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone let some of the realism be lost in order to increase the fun a platformer game can provide. It also took some liberties when compared to the book by adding new spells, changing how some of the existing spells work, leaving out story beats and ending others in order to make the gameplay fun. The whole game is about overcoming challenges by mastering our spellcraft and platforming skills, and these are the exact things that are almost totally missing from the final sequence of the game. In order to defeat Fluffy, we need to... you know what, I just show it. This is not fun at all, and is, in fact, rather hard. It is not evident at first that the heads go to sleep or wake up with differing speeds, and if you do not know what you are doing, defeating Fluffy can be very frustrating. And the saddest part is that we do a mission for Hagrid that is not in the book at all. It would have been a perfect opportunity to teach us this game mechanic on weaker enemies, maybe something with only 2 heads and a bit more forgiving timing. The next challenge is the Devil's Snare. At least we have met this evil plant during our Incendio challenge, so the foreshadowing was there. However, mechanically, this level is boring. We can only move in the left-right axis and cast Incendio like a madman. Or we can take our time, it does not matter, Ron and Hermione are only captured, they are not in any danger whatsoever. This could have been an intense timed platforming challenge where we need to reach Ron and Hermione before they are choked, defeating the vines as we go. Sadly, this is not the case, but at least this challenge is much easier than getting Fluffy to sleep. The third challenge is the room with the flying keys. As Ron mentions, we can put our Quidditch skills to practice, and he's not wrong. This is the only challenge the game prepared us with the broomstick practice and Quidditch, and while I find the flying mechanics in this game weak and unsatisfying, at least this level builds on mechanics that we already know, hence it is a good final test of our broomstick skills. The fourth challenge is the game of chess, but before we reach the board, we need to go through a corridor and it floats in space. Up to now, I really like the design of the rooms. The colors and textures still bring that mysterious atmosphere the game introduced to us when we stepped our foot onto the Forbidden Corridor. However, by the time we reach the chess challenge, this falls apart. I do not know if this was a deliberate design choice or the developers were simply running out of time, but it seems a bit out of of place to me. There are levels where the map just freely floats, such as the circular room in the dungeons or the ramparts, but I always attributed those to the limitations of the hardware and the artistic exaggeration of the abyss below. Here, the corridor is floating in nothingness, and it is really strange. The chess challenge itself is a mess, both colors want to kill us, and we need to trick the pieces into attacking and destroying each other instead of us. Introducing this mechanic earlier would have been difficult, and the game of chess is probably not everyone's cup of tea, but maybe this is the place where the designers could have used a bit of liberty and create something that involves more spellcastings or platforming. The fifth challenge is about finding the right potion to cross the flames. In the book, it involved a riddle, something that is not easily converted into a video game. To solve this issue, the designers created this. Following the path of the vials becomes very hard by the end, the guessing mechanic is clumsy, and we need to find the right potion 5 times before we are allowed to progress. This level is not fun at all, and it is way too punishing. As Hermione puts it,
Now, that's ridiculous.
and I could not agree more. And let's assume for a moment that this mechanic is fun and not frustrating at all for the player. Why introduce this mechanic only here when we had a full potions lesson? Instead of collecting ingredients, why could not we select some potions using the same mechanic? I have probably said it several times that flying in this game is bad, but at least I can understand and respect how the flying levels build on each other and become progressively harder. Here, there is nothing like that. This challenge is frustrating and bad. After selecting the correct potion and crossing the black flames, we finally see the person we are chasing, and of course it is Professor Quirrel. After the last platforming section of the game, we finally meet him, and surprise, this challenge is not coming from the book, it only exists in the game, and it is the most fun out of the challenges of the Forbidden Corridor. We need to climb up the platform, and to do that we need to push one large and one small box to the other part of the arena. At first, Quirrel just pushes the boxes back, but once we reach Quirrel's side of the arena, he instead casts the death curse at us. We can run away or use the boxes as shields. If we manage to climb up to the platform, he furiously leaves for the last room, and as we follow him, the final battle of the game begins. The battle against Voldemort has 2 phases. In phase 1, we need to hide behind the large columns, wait for Voldemort to loosen them with the death curse, and then we need to push the column onto Voldemort using Flipendo. Even if we damage him with all of the columns, he still has around half of his health remaining. This is where phase 2 begins, and this is where I really wish Dumbledore had told us everything so that we are prepared. This game has a tutorial for everything. It tells you how to jump, how to cast a spell, what spell works on what object, and it does not shy away from breaking the 4th wall with phrases such as press the mouse button. Yet, when it comes to the obscure one-off mechanics of the Forbidden Corridor, the game tells us nothing, not even a use the damn mirror, Harry, because once you realize you can cast Flipendo on the mirror to rotate it, and that one half of the mirror is able to reflect spells, with enough patience you can reflect Voldemort's spell back at him and win. This battle is not satisfying, at least for me, but Voldemort goes out in a series of beautiful fireworks, so that is something. The outro is a slideshow, just like the intro, but as I said previously, I am fine with it. If we manage to collect all wizard cards and a certain number of beans, I have read it both to be 250 and 300, I guess it is better to aim for the higher number, we are awarded a few extra slides in which Ron gives Harry the final wizard card with Harry's image on it. The last cinematic shows why the Weasley twins were collecting all those beans, and while not in the books, I really like how the designers added this prank, because I am sure this is something the real Fred and George would definitely do. And with this, we reach the credits. So, what is wrong with the ending levels of this otherwise really good and fun game? To put it simply, it is the plethora of badly introduced and not at all fun single-use game mechanics. I understand that these challenges are described in the books, hence they are a necessity, but this game already modified the story at certain places and it added non-realistic elements to provide a more fun and enjoyable experience to the players, so I have no idea why it had these short and uninspired levels for the climax of the game. If I had to guess, I would say it was because of a looming deadline, but it could also be requests from Warner Brothers or maybe from Rowling herself. But whatever the real reason is, the sad truth is that the quality of the ending is far below everything this game is capable of. So, what did we learn from all of this? After all, my main goal with this video was to explain what I like and dislike about this game and do it in a way that can be useful for other game developers. I have collected my observations into different lists, so let's start going through them. Collectibles and level design. Limited number of collectibles with clearly defined purposes, beans, the number goes up collectible, challenge stars, the level specific collectible, wizard card, the overarching valuable collectible. Have hints about the number of secret areas and the most valuable collectible. If level selection is not possible, make sure that backtracking is possible, and if the player reaches a point that makes backtracking impossible, for example beginning of new level, communicate it clearly. Show treasures that are in hidden places so the player knows when to look for them. Use collectibles to lead the player. If you reuse locations, add some variation each time. Story. Having an overarching side plot can be fun. Cutscenes need to be skippable. Atmosphere. In modern game editors, one of the easiest ways to invoke a certain atmosphere is by lighting. Do not be afraid to exaggerate lighting. Music, or lack thereof, as well as sound effects, can invoke strong feelings. Do that extra step, for example use from windows, ornaments, background noises. Gameplay. Avoid single-use mechanics if you can. Introduce new mechanics in a safe environment, use them later with extra difficulty added. Enemy AI does not have to be complex for the enemies to be fun. Choose the type of saving mechanism that fits your game. If a game mechanic is not fun, consider leaving it out. Do not make the player relearn things by altering game mechanics. It can be used if it is a deliberate design choice and serves a purpose, however, it was not the case in this game. Follow the fun, do not care if the game becomes a bit game-like because of that. Thank you very much for sticking to the end with me. Making this video was a huge endeavor and took much longer than I anticipated, which might not be a bad thing after all, since I want these videos to be helpful and as the saying goes, good work requires time. You might have noticed that this video had more of a walkthrough-like structure, which is different from my previous game review video. I felt that this structure fits better for this type of game, but I would like to have your opinions about it in the comment section. The other review video in question was about Gothic 1, one of my all-time favorite RPGs. You can watch that review here. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. See you in the next one, bye!